Imagine wading waist deep into a swamp where the water is dark and thick, the air heavy with buzzing insects, and every ripple could mean death. 5 million years before the first spark of fire, our fragile ancestors found themselves in such places, not by choice, but by necessity. Hunger drove them into waters that belonged to crocodiles the size of boats, serpents coiled like fallen logs, and birds of prey that circled overhead, waiting for weakness. The swamp was a place of abundance, fish, roots, and water plants, but every step came with the chance of being dragged under forever. This is the untold story of how early humans survived in swamps full of predators. Stay with us to discover their struggle, their courage, and their will to endure. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss humanity's earliest survival stories. 6.1 million years ago, Africa was a land of extremes. Vast savannas stretched across the horizon, deserts loomed on one side, and forests clung stubbornly to life. But between these worlds lay something different: wetlands and swamps where land and water merged into a dangerous frontier. For early hominins, these swamps were both promise and peril. Food was scarce in the open plains. Insects, roots, and small animals could not always sustain them, but the swamps teeming with fish, frogs, birds, and edible plants offered abundance. To approach the swamp was to risk everything, but to avoid it meant certain hunger. The environment was suffocating. Thick air, heavy with humidity, clung to their skin. Mosquitoes swarmed endlessly, biting, spreading disease. Mud sucked at their feet, slowing every movement. And all around, predators ruled: giant crocodiles, monstrous snakes, and ambush hunters hidden beneath the surface. Yet our ancestors dared. Small bands ventured into the wetlands, their survival instincts forcing them to test this alien world. Some perished, others endured. And those who endured learned lessons that would shape humanity's unyielding will to survive. This is their story: the struggle for survival in swamps full of predators. Hunger had driven them farther than they had ever dared to go. The forests were thinning, the savannas were drying, and the roots and berries they once relied on had grown scarce. Each day, the small band moved with heavier steps, carrying infants clutched to chests, eyes scanning the horizon for food. Ahead stretched a different world, a swamp shimmering with stagnant water, buzzing with life. To their eyes, it was strange, alien. The air was thicker, wet, almost suffocating. Clouds of mosquitoes hovered above the water, stinging any exposed skin, leaving trails of irritation that burned and itched. The ground was soft, sucking at their feet, threatening to trap them in every step. The smell of decay hung in, the air rot, mud, and death mingling into something foul yet rich with hidden promise. For the first time, they hesitated. The savannah had taught them to watch for lions and hyenas. The desert had taught them to fear thirst. But this swamp carried secrets they could not yet name. Beneath its still surface, shadows shifted. Ripples spread without warning. Logs floated where no trees stood. The elders in the group grunted low, signaling caution. Instinct screamed, danger lived here. Yet hunger is louder than fear. The children whimpered, their cries weak with exhaustion. The adults exchanged glances, knowing the truth: there was no going back. Behind them lay starvation. Ahead, at least, there was water. Perhaps there was food, perhaps survival. And so they stepped forward. Mud swallowed their feet. The water rose to their knees, then their waists. The swamp accepted them with a chilling silence, broken only by the buzzing of insects and the distant croak of frogs. They moved in a tight cluster, clinging to one another for balance, every sense straining against the unknown. With each step, the swamp revealed itself not as empty, but alive, teeming, waiting, watching. They had entered a new world, and survival would demand everything they had. At first, the swamp seemed nothing but misery. Insects bit relentlessly, mud pulled at their legs, and every ripple brought panic. But hunger sharpened their vision. Slowly, they began to see what lay beneath the murk. Fish darted in shallow pools, their scales flashing when the sun cut through gaps in the reeds. Frogs croaked from lily pads, their slick bodies plump with meat. Birds waded in the water on long, stilt-like legs, stabbing beaks into the mud to pull out wriggling eels. Even plants thrived here, roots tangled deep in the soil, their stalks edible if one had the patience to dig. The band grew bold. One male lunged at a fish, splashing with clumsy hands. It slipped through his grip, leaving him gasping and soaked, but the attempt sparked hope. Soon others joined, corralling fish into shallows where they could scoop them out with cupped hands. The first catch was met with cries of triumph, raw and strange. The flesh filled empty bellies with life. Children learned quickly, their laughter returning as they chased frogs in the shallows. Women dug at the muddy banks, pulling out roots to chew. Even elders, who had stumbled on the savannah, found strength here, gathering plants that required less chasing than antelope or hares. But the swamp was no gift freely given. Each success came with risk. While one adult bent low to grab a frog, ripple spread behind him, something larger, watching. Another reached for a plant root, only to feel the mud shift underfoot, forcing him to yank free before it pulled him deeper. Still, the temptation was too great. The swamp held food in abundance, more than the savannah had offered in weeks. And for the first time in many desperate days, the band felt not just relief, but hope. Yet hidden in that hope was danger, waiting patiently beneath the surface. For every fish they caught, every frog they seized, they drew closer to the jaws that ruled this watery world. Beneath the still waters of the swamp, predators older than time lay in wait. To the untrained eye, they looked like logs drifting lazily across the surface. But their eyes betrayed them, two golden orbs just above the waterline, unblinking, watching. These were crocodiles, far larger than the ones we know today, reaching lengths of 6, even 7 meters. Apex hunters, perfectly adapted to this world. For our ancestors, these monsters were terror incarnate. One moment, the swamp seemed calm. The next, it erupted in violence. A sudden splash, a flash of teeth, and an unlucky forager vanished beneath the surface. The water churned red, then stilled again, leaving nothing but ripples. The band learned quickly. They avoided deep water, clung to shallows, and never lingered too long in one place. Adults formed protective rings when children entered the swamp, keeping eyes on every ripple, every shadow. Stones became their only defense, hurled desperately at the eyes that glowed just above the water. Sometimes the projectiles startled the beasts, sometimes they did not. Fear became a constant companion. Every step into the swamp carried a calculation, food or death. A frog caught too far from shore was not worth the risk. A fish in deeper pools was left to swim free. Even drinking became dangerous. Bending low to sip from the water could invite a sudden strike. Instead, they scooped with cupped hands, always retreating to firmer ground. The crocodiles were not mindless killers. They were patient teachers. From them, our ancestors learned vigilance. They learned caution, the art of reading ripples, of sensing the unseen. Those who survived carried these instincts forward, instincts that would shape generations. The swamp gave food, yes, but it also demanded a toll. And the crocodiles were the collectors. If crocodiles ruled the water, another predator ruled the edges, the serpents. Some were small, like the pythons and boas that still live today, but others were giants, stretching over 10 meters, thicker than a man's torso. To our ancestors, these snakes were living nightmares, silent, patient, lethal. They blended into the swamp with uncanny perfection. A fallen log on the bank might suddenly shift, uncoiling into scales and muscle. Tall reeds swayed, disguising a coiled body hidden within. Strikes came without warning, explosive lunges, jaws snapping shut, bodies wrapping in suffocating coils. For the band, encounters with these serpents were moments of sheer panic. Screams echoed across the swamp as adults rushed forward, hurling stones, striking with sticks, pulling at the coils that crushed their kin. Sometimes they succeeded, freeing a victim battered but alive. Other times, they could only watch in horror as the swamp claimed another life. Fear of the serpents reshaped behavior. No one walked alone near the water's edge. Children were kept close, constantly guarded. Before resting, the band scouted for shapes that did not belong. Logs too smooth, reeds bent unnaturally. Over time, their eyes grew sharper, trained to notice the details that meant survival. But even in terror, lessons were learned. they discovered that serpents avoided fireless open ground, preferring cover. They learned that loud noise, shouts, stomps, thrown stones could sometimes drive them away. They came to recognize patterns. After a serpent struck, it would not hunt again for days, leaving an area temporarily safe. In the coils of these ancient snakes, humanity found one of its earliest teachers in vigilance and cooperation. The swamp was shaping them, molding instincts of awareness, group defense, and memory. Every serpent's ambush carved fear into their minds, but also sharpened the tools of survival. The swamp's dangers did not only rise from the water or coil along the banks. Some descended from the open sky. By day, the firmament wheeled with wings broad, slow-moving silhouettes that drifted on thermals, and tighter, raptor-like shapes that cut the air with purposeful intent. To a hungry band of early hominins, the sky itself was a hunting ground filled with rivals and predators, and the smallest among them, infants and toddlers, were the most vulnerable. At first, they did not understand why the air darkened in circles above the reeds. The big birds, vultures, and marabou-like storks rode spirals of heat, eyeing the water for the slightest sign of weakness. A fish stunned near the surface, a frog clambering through lily pads, a small primate separated from its group. When one of the children paused to scoop at a tadpole-rich puddle, a shadow fell across the mud. A huge beak slashed the air, the bird's wings beating like sheets of leather. The adults exploded in shouts and arm waves, hurling clods and stones. The bird veered up with an aggrieved croak, circling back to judge their fury. They learned to watch the sky as carefully as they watched the water. Sentinels emerged, usually the quick-eyed, those who startled least, posting themselves on hummocks to scan for moving shadows. A single guttural call meant "look up," another meant "close ranks." Mothers drew infants tighter to their chests whenever the wind fell still and the air turned glassy, for stillness made the band easy to see. Not all winged threats came in swoops. On the mudflats, towering waders with spear-like beaks, heron and stork analogues claimed the shallows as their own. They strutted on stilts through water that barely covered their ankles, jabbing with precision at anything that wriggled. When the band waded out to corral fish toward a net of reeds, these birds trotted beside them like resentful neighbors, snatching prizes from the very edges of human hands. If a small child lingered, the big birds pecked with bruising force, a warning that could break skin and spirit. The band's answer was choreography. They learned to move in lines with the tallest adults at the flanks, sticks held high to enlarge their silhouettes. When a raptor stooped, the flanks flared outward, arms waving, stones arcing skyward to break the attack run. Flat-throwing stones chosen for their skin became aerial deterrents. No single throw was decisive, but a rain of them taught even bold birds that this troop stung back. Eggs and chicks were contested currency. The band coveted nests hidden in reed beds and low branches above the waterline, precious fat and protein in shells. But raiding a nest brought fury. Gulls and terns harried with relentless dives, beaks clipping ears, wings buffeting faces. The group answered with branches held like shields, a living roof under which the egg-bearer ducked and ran. They timed raids for the thin light just after dawn, when the air was cool and the thermals weak, when the great circling carrion birds were slow to rise. Sometimes, patience was the better defense. After an infant's near miss, they shifted their day so that the smallest forage near the densest reeds, where the canopy of stems broke sightlines from above. Adults chose resting places under overhanging boughs, the kind that fractured the sun into shards and made shadows unreadable from the sky. On open mudbanks, they built rough screens leaning dead fronds and reeds to make low arches clumsy shelters that baffled the long, searching glances of circling scavengers. The winged rivals taught more than vigilance, they taught tempo. In bright noon, when heat silenced frogs and fish tucked into shade, the birds ruled the open shallows. So the band learned to push hard at the bookends of the day. A flurry of gathering at first light before the air filled with wings, and again in late afternoon as the sky's hunters drifted inland to roost. Between these windows, they stayed closer to cover, sorting roots, breaking shells with stones, mending their reed bundles, saving strength. On one evening, the wind came in hard from the west, pocking the swamp surface with tiny dimples. The circling shadows thinned, the air too turbulent for easy flight. The band surged into the shallows, a chain of hands funneling minnows toward a natural pocket. Children shrieked with triumph. Adults laughed for the first time that day. Even the sentinels allowed a brief smile. The lesson etched itself into memory. When the wind is restless, the sky's hunters tire. When the wind rests, beware the shadow that grows. Across days and seasons, a simple truth fixed itself in their bones. Danger is not only the roar in front of you, sometimes it is the silence above. And once you can read the sky the way wings rise on warm currents, the way shadows lengthen before a dive, you are no longer merely prey. You are a partner in a dance. Time to light and wind, to angle and arc, to the measured bravery of a troop that has learned to fight the air itself. If crocodiles were the swamp's teeth and the great birds its eyes, then insects were its breath, constant, invasive, inescapable. The air itself seemed alive. Mosquitoes moved in clouds that found every patch of skin, turning ankles into constellations of welts, making sleep a bargaining ritual with misery. Midges drifted like dust motes until they burst against lips and eyelids. Horseflies drilled and tore. Tiny ticks burrowed in secret places. Each bite was a theft. Of blood, of calm, of days unbroken by fever. The band's first defense was motion, then mud. They learned to keep low wind at their backs, choosing the breezier hummocks and the thinnest stands of reeds when they could. But wind fails and the sun sinks. Then came the clay. They smeared themselves from shin to shoulder, painting bodies in a dull, cracked armor that confused the probing mouths of insects. Children giggled through the sting as mothers traced stripes and swirls with muddy fingers, turning skin into camouflage and shield. The layer smelled of earth and rot, but it worked less sting, fewer welts, more peace in the brief hours when sleep was possible. They discovered rhythms too. At first light, before the day warmed, the smallest swarms slept. That was the time to move camps, to cross the more stagnant channels, to raid the reed beds for nests. At dusk, when the air cooled and the wind died, the swarms returned in force. The band retreated to higher ground where the breeze persisted, huddling with backs to the gusts, faces tucked into crooks of elbows until the worst passed. Bites alone were bearable. What followed was the deeper peril. Some mornings, a child woke hot and glassy-eyed, skin flushed, small body trembling. An elder who had laughed the night before now shivered in the heat, staring past his kin as if across an invisible river. The band learned the signs. The heavy sleep that would not refresh, the thirst without end, the sudden loss of strength in the middle of a simple task. They did not name the sickness, but they knew its rules. It demanded shade, it demanded water, it demanded quiet days while others took up the work. Caring for the weak sharpened their choreography of survival. Two adults would gather broad leaves to fan away flies and cool fevered skin. Others chewed fibrous stalks and pressed the wet pulp to parched lips. The strongest carried double burdens, infants and reed bundles, fish baskets and digging sticks so that the sick could ride on shoulders through the shallows. They shifted their sleeping rings, placing the fevered at the center where body heat was shared, where night winds bit less fiercely. Parasites taught them to move. Stagnant pools bred more than fish. They brewed illness. When too many in the band began to cough, when diarrhea weakened the legs of half the troop, an elder would shuffle to the water's edge and scoop a handful. He would let it settle, then pour the clearer surface water into another palm and drink from there. The gesture became habit. Take water that has rested, not water stirred from the bottom. When possible, ladle from the side that faces the wind, not the lee where scum collects. In the absence of fire, such small choices drew thin lines between sickness and strength. Leeches were the swamp's secret hands. Children came from the water with small black commas clinging to their ankles. Mothers pinched them loose and scraped them away with a flat shard, compressing the bite to still the slow, stubborn bleeding. The lesson followed quickly. Check each other at the waterline, turn ankles in the light, lift hair and look behind knees. In a world without mirrors, care became a communal mirror held by many eyes. When illness lingered, they folded time around it. A foraging run that might have taken a morning stretched across a day so that a feverish child could rest in the shade while others cycled out and back with handfuls of food. The troop spaced itself not so far that a crocodile could break the line, not so close that breath and sweat turned into heat and agitation. They learned patience, endurance, the long arithmetic of living many days instead of winning any single one. There were gifts among the torments. The same muddy banks that spawned swarms also offered clays that soothed. A pale, fine layer beneath the darker crust mixed to a cooling paste. Spread on bites, it took the fire from skin. A bitter, reed-yielded sap that, when smeared along wrists and ankles, seemed to blunt the interest of flies. Perhaps it was only the smell, perhaps something in the plant offended tiny mouths. Either way, the gesture became ritual. Dab, smear, breathe easier. On one heavy evening, the air pressed so close that every breath felt like drinking. Mosquitoes lifted in veils from the grass, and the band's composure began to fray. Then, the wind turned. A breath from the open plain rippled the swamp's skin, and the veil tore. In the brief mercy, an elder motioned to move. They crossed to a breezier ridge and settled, the smallest at the center, the sickest with their heads in a mother's lap. Above them, the first stars came out, crisp and cold far away, unbitten. The elder lifted a hand as if measuring distance to that clean, unbreathing sky, then lowered it to brush a child's cheek. The lesson fixed: choose the wind, choose the high place, choose the small habits that make the next dawn possible. The insects never relented, but the band learned to turn annoyance into knowledge, knowledge into practice, and practice into survival. In a land where claws and teeth ended lives in a heartbeat. It was the tiniest mouths that taught the slow, stubborn art of living long enough to try again tomorrow. The swamp was not like the savannah, where running meant escape. Here, every step was a battle. The ground shifted, sucked, and resisted. Mud clung to ankles like hands, pulling backward with every lift of the foot. Waterlogged roots snagged toes, reeds tangled arms. Even the strongest adult, burdened by hunger and exhaustion, staggered like a trapped animal in these depths. When predators struck, the swamp itself became an accomplice. A crocodile lunging from beneath the surface found its prey slowed, their thrashing muffled by water and mud. A giant snake had no need to chase, its victims were already hobbled. Even a child slipping waist-deep into a bog could drown before anyone reached them. Movement here was never guaranteed. The band learned quickly that to survive, they had to move as one. Single wanderers stood no chance. Together, there was hope. They formed chains, each adult gripping the arm or waist of another, creating a living rope across treacherous ground. When one slipped, others pulled them upright. When a foot sank deep, hands braced under the arms and heaved with grunts until the mud released its prisoner with a foul, sucking noise. Children were carried high on shoulders or backs, their small limbs wrapped tight around adults who pushed through the mire with trembling legs. Infants rode against chests, lashed in slings of woven reeds and animal hide, protected from both the swamp and the constant insects. Sometimes, cooperation became desperation. Once, when an elder sank into a patch of muck too deep, the band formed a ring around him, hauling in rhythm, voices raised in guttural calls that echoed across the reeds. Mud rose to his chest, sucking at his ribs, threatening to claim him. With one final heave, they tore him free, his body smeared with black filth, his breath ragged but alive. The swamp had demanded one of its cruelest tests, and the band had answered with unity. From these struggles, instincts grew. They learned to test the ground before stepping, pressing sticks into the soil ahead to gauge its firmness. They avoided still, glossy patches where mud waited deepest, preferring roots cluttered with reeds and roots that offered some stability. They moved slowly, deliberately, like dancers in a rhythm older than thought, each step measured against the swamp's hunger. The swamp punished haste, but rewarded patience. To move here was to learn humility, to know that the land itself could kill as swiftly as any predator. Yet it was in this mud, in this daily struggle for movement, that the band discovered something greater than strength. They discovered cooperation. Alone, they would sink. Together, they walked. The day in the swamp was treacherous, but Endiite was a terror beyond words. When the sun sank and shadows dissolved into blackness, the swamp became a chamber of sound. Frogs croaked in a deafening chorus, insects hummed and whined, wings beat in the dark. But beneath these sounds came others, low splashes, heavy breathing, the slither of scales through water. The band sought high ground to rest, clambering onto hummocks or leaning against half-submerged trees. They huddled close, pressing bodies together for warmth and protection. Without fire, the darkness was complete, pierced only by the pale glow of the moon reflected on pools of black water. To their eyes, the swamp at night was alive with hidden movements they could not see. Predators ruled this time. Crocodiles slid silently through the channels, their eyes glowing faintly like embers. At night, they hunted with greater freedom, drawn by the sound of splashes, the smell of bodies. The band could sense them even when sight failed, ripples brushing against their legs, the faint bump of a scaled body passing too close. Every creak of water sent hearts pounding. Mothers pulled children tighter, elders gripped stones, waiting for the surge that might come at any moment. Snakes, too, prowled the darkness. Their coils rustled reeds, their bodies glided unseen. More than once, a scream tore the night when a serpent brushed across a resting body, sending the group into chaos. They waved sticks, shouted, pelted the unseen shapes with whatever they could grasp, praying the predator would slip back into the water. The night carried voices as well calls of unseen beasts. Hyenas from the savannah sometimes wandered near, their laughter mingling with the swamp's cries. Birds shrieked from trees. Strange, deep bellows echoed from creatures hidden in the mist. Every sound became a threat, every silence an omen. To endure, the band created rituals of survival. They slept in shifts, some keeping watch, while others closed their eyes for moments of uneasy rest. Sentinels stood on roots or higher ground, straining to pierce the dark with ears sharper than eyes. Stones were kept in piles, ready to throw at any ripple too close. Children were always placed in the center of the huddle, shielded by the circle of adults. Night was not only fear, it was a lesson. It taught them the value of vigilance, of endurance, of trusting one another. Though predators stalked unseen, the group's unity was its shield. Alone, each would have vanished into the black water. Together, they endured until dawn. And when the first light touched the swamp, when shadows lifted and predators retreated into hiding, the survivors breathed as one. Another night had been conquered not by strength, not by speed, but by cooperation and vigilance born in the heart of fear. Every hostile environment etched lessons into the bones of our ancestors, and the swamp was no different. It was not merely a place of food and fear, it was a teacher, shaping instincts that would echo through millions of years. The first lesson was patience. In the savannah, speed could mean survival, running fast, striking quickly, but in the swamp, haste was punished. Those who lunged too boldly sank in mud. Those who reached too far risked ambush. Survival here meant slowing down, watching, waiting. A ripple on the water's edge was studied before approaching. A patch of mud was tested with sticks before stepping. From the swamp, humanity learned caution. The second lesson was vigilance. Predators struck from every angle below, above, behind. To live, the band had to keep its eyes everywhere. Sentinels became essential, watching the sky, scanning the reeds, listening for silence that fell before a strike. The swamp sharpened their awareness, forcing them to sense danger in ways modern humans can scarcely imagine. The third lesson was cooperation. Alone, no one could face the swamp's predators. But in numbers, they could drive away serpents with stones, rescue one another from the mud, shield infants from the sky's talons. Even the smallest roles mattered. Children's cries could alert the band, elders' warnings guided the young, mothers' vigilance kept the group tight. The swamp taught that survival was not an individual act, but a collective one. The fourth lesson was memory. Patterns became lifelines. They remembered which pools held fish at dawn, which banks hid snakes, which nights the mosquitoes were thickest, which ridges were safest from tides. This memory passed from one day to the next, from elders to children, laying the first stones of culture. The swamp was cruel, but it forged resilience. In its mire, our ancestors became more than fragile apes. They became learners, planners, cooperators, creatures who could turn fear into strategy, accident into lesson, and lesson into survival. Not every band stayed in the wetlands. For some, the price was too high, too many lives lost to crocodiles, too many fevers, too many nights of terror. They retreated to higher, drier ground, carrying with them memories of the swamp's dangers, but others adapted. They returned again and again, mastering the swamp's rhythm. These were the ones who grew stronger, wiser. They learned where to step, what to eat, when to hide, and when to act. For them, the swamp was no longer only a place of death, but of opportunity. It provided water when rivers dried, fish when savannas failed, roots when forests thinned. To those who endured, it became a refuge, even if a dangerous one. Over generations, these lessons spread. Bands that survived the swamps carried their knowledge into other landscapes. They brought sharper vigilance to the savanna, better cooperation to the desert, and deeper patience to the forest. The instincts born in the wetlands traveled beyond them, shaping survival wherever humans wandered. The swamp left a mark greater than food or water. It left an instinctive fear of what lurks unseen, a respect for the hidden predator. It left the habit of testing ground, of checking water, of watching the sky. Even today, when we step into murky water or hear the buzz of insects in the dark, echoes of that ancient caution stir within us. The swamp was not a place our ancestors conquered, it was a place that changed them, and in enduring its trials, they became creatures capable of facing the endless challenges that lay ahead. The swamp was a crucible, a world where death lurked in every shadow and survival was never guaranteed. Its waters hid giants, its banks concealed coils, its skies rained down wings and claws. It drained strength, spread sickness, and tested every limit of endurance, and yet, our ancestors survived it. Not all many perished, swallowed by mud, dragged beneath by jaws, claimed by fever, but those who endured carried with them something greater than food or safety. They carried lessons that would shape the destiny of humankind. From the swamp, they learned patience, to wait, to watch, to move carefully. They learned vigilance, to sense danger from every direction. They learned cooperation, to hold together, to fight together, to rescue one another. They learned memory, to pass knowledge forward, turning experience into instinct. The swamp did not break them. It forged them. Every ripple studied, every predator faced, every night survived added to the story of resilience that defines humanity. When we look today at wetlands, at their still waters, their hidden dangers, their haunting beauty, we see not just ecosystems. We see echoes of a trial endured 6 million years ago. We see the place where fragile apes learned to think, to cooperate, to survive. If this story of resilience inspired you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others so we can continue bringing you the forgotten struggles that shaped our species.